Ladies and gentlemen, let's talk now about baking biscuits, because they are also a very important delicacy in the baking industry. There are some of your customers who are going to come because they don't afford cakes, they don't afford muffins, but at least biscuits are smaller, they are cheaper, and they are affordable. There are so many of your customers who can actually want to be served biscuits with coffee at a shop. So let's just dive into it. The ingredients are almost similar to those of a cake, because as you can see, we are still seeing milk and sugar and powders like cinnamon and chocolate powder, and this is margarine or butter. These are eggs, they have been beaten, they are in the bowl there, and the same tools that we use. This is the roller and this is the flour, obviously, and those are the oils. You can talk of olive oils and canola oil. They are also very convenient to use in making biscuits. But how then do we turn what we see here on the screen into the biscuits that we see in that plate? Well, let's dive into the procedure. So first of all, you have to preheat the oven to the temperature specified by your recipe. The preheating oven temperature is usually typically around 400 degrees Fahrenheit or about 200 degrees Celsius. So make sure that you preheat the oven to ensure that the biscuits bake evenly and develop a crispy exterior. After that, you mix in a bowl the dry ingredients such as flour, baking powder, salt and sugar. So by mixing these dry ingredients together, you will create the base for your biscuit dough, and ensure that the ingredients are well combined before moving on to the next steps in the biscuit making process. After this, you have to cut in cold butter or shortening into the dry ingredients using a pastry cutter or 2 knives until the mixture resembles coarse crumbs. Start by cutting the cold butter or shortening it into small pieces. Add the butter or shortening pieces to the dry ingredients in the mixing bowl, and use a pastry cutter or 2 knives to cut the butter or shortening into the dry ingredients. Continue cutting and mixing until the mixture looks like coarse crumbs with pea-sized pieces of butter shortening. This process will help create a flaky texture in your biscuit dough. So after this, you can then make a well in the center of the mixture, and then slowly add small amounts of cold water while mixing until a stiff dough forms. Use a spatula or spoon to create a well in the center of the dry ingredients mixture in the mixing bowl. Gradually pour small amounts of cold water into the well while gently mixing the dry ingredients into the water. Continue adding water and mixing until a stiff dough forms, being careful not to over mix. So the dough should hold together without being too wet or too sticky, allowing you to shape it into biscuits. After that, roll the dough on a floured surface to your desired thickness. Sprinkle some flour on a clean work surface to prevent the dough from sticking, and then place the dough on the floured surface and use a rolling pin to gently roll it out in all directions. Roll the dough to your desired thickness, whether you prefer thicker or thinner biscuits. So be sure to lift and turn the dough occasionally to prevent it from sticking to the surface. Once the dough is rolled out to the desired thickness, you can then proceed with cutting out the biscuits and baking them. So how do we bake the biscuits then? You place them on a baking sheet lined with parchment paper, or that is lightly greased. How do you do that? After rolling out the dough and cutting out the biscuits, you transfer them to a baking sheet. You line the baking sheet with parchment paper to prevent the biscuits from sticking. Alternatively, you can lightly grease the baking sheet with butter or cooking spray. You can then arrange the biscuits on the prepared baking sheet, leaving some space between each biscuit for even baking. Once the biscuits have been placed on the baking sheet, they are now ready to be baked in an oven. They will now be ready to be baked in the oven. So bake the biscuits in the preheated oven for the specified time in your recipe until they are golden brown and crispy. The preheated specified temperature is 400 degrees Fahrenheit or 200 degrees Celsius. You place the biscuits in that heated oven and then bake them for about 10 to 15 minutes until they are golden brown and crispy on the outside. Just keep an eye on the biscuits while they are baking to ensure they do not overcook and become too dark, otherwise your customers are not going to like them. So once the biscuits are done baking, carefully remove them from the oven, allow them to cool slightly before enjoying them, and then you let the biscuits cool, and then definitely you are going to be ready to serve them to your customers. So here are the biscuits. They are now, some are still in the oven, some have been taken out of the oven. They are golden, crispy brown. They are not too dark, and they are not too light as well, because that's a sign that you undercooked them. So you underbaked them rather, because we're talking about baking here. So from here, this chef is so creative with their decorations. Look at how nice their decorations are. This is going to help the customers enjoy them. And the next video is also going to show you a few more other tricks that you can use to make sure that your biscuits attract as much customers as possible and your business is going to succeed. I wish you all the best, ladies and gentlemen.